So you want to be a web developer, and you probably have questions just running through your head. You probably are asking yourself, what software do I need to download? What equipment do I need to buy? Can I even do this? And I'm here to tell you right now, you can do this. And so in this video, we're going to answer all those questions. We're going to get you up and running so you can continue on with the lessons in this series. What I have here is an incredibly old laptop. This laptop came out the same year that the iPad mini first got released back in 2012. This computer has buttons that are missing, it has scratches, indentations, it's really been through a lot. And I know what you're saying, it's a MacBook, but it's still a really old computer. And I bring this up because you're beginning your journey to becoming a web developer. So you're probably asking, is the equipment that I have enough for beginning my journey as a web developer? And I'm letting you know now that the chances are very likely you already have everything that you need to become a web developer. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the equipment and the setup that you need to begin your journey as a web developer. So let's talk about your equipment. To be a web developer, you really don't need a crazy fast machine. In fact, the most intensive program that we're going to be using is Visual Studio Code. And you'll see that Visual Studio Code supports both Windows and Mac OS. And from there, they really only recommend a 1.6 gigahertz or faster processor or 1 gigabyte of RAM. Now, the chances are that the machine that you have actually has a significantly higher performance than what Visual Studio Code recommends. So as long as your machine supports this, then you'll be fine. But as you follow along in this series, just note that I will be using a Windows PC. If you are unsure whether your PC supports this, then just click down on the Windows and go to About Your PC. And there you'll see information about your processor. You'll see information about how much RAM you have. And I don't want to pull it up because it has some sensitive information, but there you'll be able to see whether or not your machine can at least support this. But like I said, it's extremely likely that you already have a machine that is significantly better than what Visual Studio Code recommends. The second thing that you'll be needing is an internet connection, and the third thing that you'll be needing is a keyboard, mouse, and monitor. Now, it is possible to program on a tablet. In this series, I'm going to be strictly using a computer, and I recommend that you do use a computer as well. Now, throughout the series, we're going to be using a series of different browsers, and I'll get into further details as to why we as web developers use different browsers. If you are on a Windows machine, then you should already have Edge installed. So if I type in Edge, you'll see right there. If you are on a Mac OS, then you should already have Safari installed. The first browser that we're going to want to make sure that we have installed is Google Chrome. Now, this page is going to look a little different depending on whether you are a Mac user or a Windows user, but the button's still going to display the correct version for your download. I'll make sure I have all the links inside the description. So to download everything easily, just go down to the description box and click on the link so you can start downloading everything. The second browser that we're going to want to make sure that we have installed is Firefox. The button to download Firefox is going to be in your top right. Again, depending on whether you're on a Mac or Windows, the software is going to be different, but the button's going to have the correct software for your device type. So the first software that we're going to want to download is going to be NodeJS and NPM. I'll get into further details about NodeJS and NPM whenever we get to that segment in our series, but what you want to do whenever you get to this page is either click on the Windows installer or the Mac installer. Just go through the installation process to install Node.js and NPM. Now let's talk about text editors. A text editor is simply a computer program that edits plain text. So an example would be if you wanted to open up and view a file, then you can open that up inside of a text editor. And this is really where we're going to be doing our primary development, is inside of a text editor application. Now, personally, I'll use Visual Studio Code as my primary text editor, and I use Sublime Text as my secondary text editor. And they both have their purposes, but really you can do everything that you need inside of Visual Studio Code. To download Visual Studio Code, you'll want to go to code.visualstudio.com and then click on download. Go through that installation process. If you need different options, then you can always click on the down arrow and then you'll have different options. But the one that is going to show up for you is going to be the one that Visual Studio recommends for you. Visual Studio Code is an application that was built by Microsoft, and it's a very, very powerful text editor that you'll see the majority of developers use Visual Studio Code. The reason I have a secondary text application is because since Visual Studio Code has so many options and it's so powerful, sometimes I literally just want to open up an application just to see what's inside. And Sublime Text is a great option as a secondary text editor if you literally just want to open up a file just to see the contents of the file. You can download Sublime Text by simply going to sublimetext.com and then clicking download for Windows. If you need additional options, then you can always click on the download, and there you'll see different options for either Mac, Windows, or Linux. But I recommend sticking with what Sublime Text already recommends. So just click on your download for Windows if you are using a Windows machine. Another extremely popular text editor is going to be Notepad++. And if you want to use this one, then you can just go to notepadplus.org and then click on download, and then click on the latest version. Now, me personally, I don't use Notepad++. I use Sublime Text over Notepad++, but honestly, they're both very powerful applications, and you'll be able to use both applications as a text editor. But the one that you definitely need to have installed is Visual Studio Code. The majority of the series will be done inside of Visual Studio Code. So now let's talk about command line applications. A command line application is simply a text-based user interface that is used to run programs, manage computer files, and interact with the computer. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. If you are on a Windows machine, by default, you're going to have PowerShell installed. So if you just put in PowerShell and open up the application, then this blue box should appear for you. So let's break this down a little bit. The command line application, we said, is a text-based user interface. A user interface is really anything that shows how you interact with the application as a user. And we are interacting with the application through text. So we won't get into too many commands on navigating the command line. There's actually a separate video for that. But if we want to interact with the computer and see, for instance, files, then I can just click on certain commands and I'll see all the files. The ls lists all the files inside of that folder. And that's really what the command line application allows for us to do, is it allows for us to type commands, manage files, and interact with the computer all through text-based commands. So if you're on a Windows machine, then you'll want to have PowerShell installed. This series won't use other command line applications, but a very, very popular one is going to be Ubuntu. And if you wanted to download this from the Microsoft Store or the Mac App Store, then you can download this application for free. If you're on a Mac computer, then the command line application that you will be using is called Terminal. Finally, the last thing that we're going to want to do is install Git. Now, in the Git series, we actually talk about the differences between Git and GitHub, and we actually create a GitHub profile. So I'm not going to get too much into details over GitHub in this video, but what you do want to have is Git installed. So if you click on this button, then this is going to either say download for Windows or download for Mac, and I'll go ahead and download for Windows and go through the installation process. Now, after you download Git and install it, then the first thing I want you to do is open up PowerShell and just type the command git. That command actually pulls up a Git manual that gives you further information over different Git commands. And if you installed Git successfully, then you'll be seeing these commands. So the second thing that we're going to want to do is configure our Git onto our machine. So if I type git config, put global, and then user.name, you're going to want to put two quotes, but then you'll want to put your name inside of those quotes. You'll know that you did it correct because if you put git config user.name without the global flag, then you'll see your name there. Then what you're going to want to do is do git config with the global flag and put user.email, and again use two quotes and then type your email. So in this case, you're going to put your email at wherever your email exists. Now, I would definitely recommend that you use an email that you're also going to be using with your GitHub profile. Now, configuring your GitHub profile inside the terminal will definitely allow you to start pushing up code to your GitHub profile. But you'll run into an issue where you're going to have to type in your password every single time. And that can be pretty tedious. So what we're going to want to do is add an SSH key into GitHub. That way you can avoid typing your password every single time. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the directions that are on the GitHub documentation site for generating a new SSH key. And I'll have this link inside the description in case some of this information gets updated or you have issues. The first thing that you're going to do is open Git Bash. So Git Bash was installed whenever you installed Git, and you'll have a terminal that pops up. And Git Bash is another command line application. So the first command you're going to want to do is check for an SSH key. And so if you type in the list ls command and you type in that .ssh, then whenever you press enter, if anything comes out for you, then you already have an SSH key. If you don't, then you're going to want to generate a new one. The way that you'll generate a new one is by pasting in the code that is in the website. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to put it inside my Git Bash. I'm going to go ahead and paste that. I'll replace my email. And then I'll press enter. And so after you press enter, you'll have enter the file in which to save the key. And so it's just saying that this is where it's going to save it at. And I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Then it'll prompt you to ask if you want to add a passphrase or a password. I am not going to add a password, so I'll press enter again. And then I'll press enter one more time to confirm it. So now if you type in the command one more time, then you'll see that your SSH pub file is in there. So after you've generated out your key, then you're going to want to copy it onto your clipboard. And so I have the commands right here, depending on what machine you're using. We're going to be using the Windows one, but if you're on a Mac, then you're going to type this into your terminal application. If you're on a Linux machine, then first you're going to want to install xclip, and you can do that with sudo apt-get install xclip. And then you'll run the command xclip cellclip with the same command as the others. So then for the Windows machine, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and go back into my Git Bash, paste it, and then I'll go ahead and press enter. So now it's copied into my clipboard. So then we're going to go ahead and go into GitHub. And if you don't have a GitHub account, watch the Git Basics Part 1 video, and it'll explain how to create a GitHub profile. So what we're going to want to do is click on our profile icon, and then we'll go to settings. And from here, if you go through the options over here, you'll see the option for SSH and GPG keys, and that's where you'll want to click. And then we'll click on the new SSH key. You can give this any kind of title that you want. Now, I recommend that you do give it a specific name, like the type of computer that you're going to be using, because especially if you have different environments, like if you are working from home or if you're working in the office, then you might have multiple computers. And so you might need to set up multiple SSH keys. So I'll set up personal computer at home. So then inside of here, you will paste in your personal key, and do not share your key with anybody else. And then you'll click add SSH key. And so now you've completed your web developer environment. So good job and keep up the good work, and we'll see you in the next video. If you appreciate this video and want to keep seeing more like this, then please do me a favor and click the subscribe button and like button down below. It really helps the channel grow, and it tells YouTube that you like this kind of content. And more importantly, you will be notified of any upcoming releases.